In today's video, we're going to be going through making a really big actor that has multiple target points. We'll be able to set what we want to have targeted based on socket locations for our actor and send that over to our soft lock system to be able to target which one is closest, and also use our hard lock to tab target between each one of these points, as well as being able to cycle through other actors on the screen in addition to our big boss actor. And we'll also have our hard lock focus on the specific location of our socket. So to set up a multi-target actor, we're going to create a new enemy blueprint. So in the content browser, we're just going to right-click on BP enemy and duplicate it. And we're going to name this BP boss. And inside our blueprint, we're going to need to add a few more functions to our target lock interface. So we're going to add a new function, and we're going to call it multi-target points. And we're going to add a few outputs. First is a Boolean that we're going to check that we want to have this be a multi-targeted actor. The next is going to be an array of names for our targets. We're going to set the targets to be the sockets of our mesh. So convert that to a name, then to an array, and we'll call this targets. And the last one we want, because we want to potentially have our line of sight or our focusing on these specific targets, the way that we do that is we need to get a reference to the mesh. So we're going to create that in this function as well to be able to pass that to our third-person character. So we'll name this actor mesh. And it is going to be type mesh component. Then we can compile it and save it. And when we target our actor, we want to have our hard lock widget cycling to each of these targets. So we also need to change the location of our target points rather than just being the location of the actor. So we're going to make a new function as well for that, and that's going to be called set target location. And it's going to take one input to pass to our boss actor, and that's going to be our target. And that's going to be of type name. And make sure that is a single and not the array. And also make sure that the mesh is also single and not an array. So we'll compile it and then save that. In our boss, we're going to implement our first interface, which is the set target location. When we call this, we're going to set our target widget to be at the location of the bone that we set here. So we can copy our target widget and then set world location. We're going to drag in our mesh and get socket location. And our socket name is the target that we pass to this interface. Now we go to our multi-target points. And we're going to be using this information in our third-person character. So we can right-click on multi-target actor. We, of course, want this to be true. Otherwise, we may not be able to target, depending on how we implement this. For our targets, we're going to make an array. And for our actor mesh, we're just going to get a reference to our own mesh, and we'll pass that along. Now, for our array, we can make literal name and copy that a few times. Add as many pins as you need and add as many targets as you need. I'm going to say the first one is going to be our hand underscore R, calf underscore L, and pelvis. So that's an array of everything that we're going to be able to target for our boss character. So let's start incorporating this into the soft lock. So in our third person character, we're going to go up to our soft lock section, and where we have the sort by distance function, we're going to add a few things here. While we're sorting through the actors, we want to also get a list of target points and check to see which one of these target points is closest. Since we already have a function that's cycling through all of our actors, we'll just add another loop here. I'm actually going to drag this out a bit, and I'm going to save the array element as a local variable, and we'll just call this actor. And we'll set our loop up, and then we're going to get a sequence. So the second step in the sequence, we're going to sort through this actor, but on the first set of our sequence, we're going to sort through our actors array. But first we need to get a branch, and we need to see if this is locked on or not, because we only want this to be run if we are not locked on to the target. So we'll check against target locked. So off of false, I'm just going to drag a reroute to the other end here. And then we can call the function for our multi-target points. Our target is going to be the local actor variable we just made. And we need to double check to see if this actor is in fact a multi-target actor. If it is, we'll proceed going forward. Otherwise, if it's not, we don't need to worry about it. It'll just go and continue our loop. So we need to save this variable of targets. So we're going to promote it to a variable. And it's going to be our targets, but we're just going to name it target bones. We'll just name it target sockets, since that's more accurate. And to make sure that this is always current, we're going to take our target bones and we are going to clear the array before we set it again. This way, our target socket is always going to be whatever we just set. And then we're going to get a for each loop. Now, for each element of our array, we're pretty much doing what we did originally with the soft lock. We just need to get the closest socket location, which is why we needed the mesh in the first place, because with our mesh, we can get socket location. And we're going to test that against the array element. And we're going to subtract this from our actor's location. Then we're going to get the length of our vector. And this is going to be our distance that we want to compare it to. So we're going to promote this to a local variable. And we'll get it as last closest socket. And we'll put a branch before this. And we will check to see if our last closest socket is less than our vector length, or if our last closest socket is equal to 0. Then we will update the last closest socket. Sorry, switch this. So our vector length has to be less than what we previously have as our closest socket. And if that's the case, we're going to save our array element as a new variable. And we're going to call this variable target socket. Then once we cycle through this loop and we're all done, we want to set the target location of our widget, our target socket. So we'll get a reference to our actor, then we'll call set target location. And then while we keep looping through this on the soft lock, every time we get here, we want to clear our last closest socket. Otherwise, it's going to remember what we had previously. So we'll set it back to 0. So let's go to our BP boss. And in our scale, we're going to set the X, Y, and Z to be 3. So then we make it very big. And we'll drag that into our level. If we start the lock, we can see we are closest to the leg. If we jump, we get closer to the hand, so it switches the soft lock over. But now we have a soft lock that's going to change our target location based on where we set these sockets to be. So now that we have the soft lock done, let's move on to the hard lock. Before we get to our focus camera, we are going to work on our target cycling. So back where we have cycle target, right after we set our hard lock widget to be hidden, we're going to add a few more items here. We're going to add a branch. And for our selected target, when we want to check to see if this is a character that has multiple target points, we could call our interface function. But another way to do this, if we don't want to bother, we can check our selected target if it is the class of BP boss. So if we type in get class, and then if you wanted to also make a child blueprint, we can check to see if this class is a child of by getting class is child. And with our test class, it's going to be whatever our selected target is, and our parent class, we're going to check to see if it is BP boss. And what's good about this is that if you do have a child class like BP mini boss that inherits from BP boss, and you have a selected target that is either of those blueprints, it's going to come back true, even if it is the parent class. So just because it checks for child doesn't mean that it only checks for child. So if it is the case that this is a BP boss blueprint, we're going to make a new variable, and then we're going to go through cycling our targets. We're going to call this new variable cycling. And we can use this variable to tell our line of sight checks or our focus target that we are currently in a manual cycling for a multi-targeted actor. And if it's not, then we can just do what we did in the previous videos and just have it based on the actor's location rather than focusing on a socket. So for cycling, we're going to set it to be false off of our false pin. And we're going to set it to be true off of our true pin. Then because when we get to this point of target cycling, we can't really rely on getting that distance function, we can get our selected target. And we can get our multi-target points. We're going to drag in our target sockets and update it before we go into target cycling. And we're going to make a new custom event for us to cycle through the sockets. So we'll call it cycle sockets. Then we'll call this after we set our sockets. And after we're done doing this, we also want to get our hard lock widget updated with whatever we come back with as the selected target. So we're going to drag the end pin into here, and we'll leave it at that. So this is essentially just making another manual for loop. We're going to make a new index just like we did previously, and we're just going to call it socket index. For our socket index, we're going to check to see if it is less than the length of our target sockets array. We'll check to see that with a branch. And if this is the case that we are over the limit, then we want to end our cycling. So we're just going to create a custom event for now. And we're going to call it end cycle. And call it off the false pin. And we'll worry about this in just a minute. But if we're not over our length, we're going to get another branch, and we're going to take our single target socket and check to see if we are currently selecting the same thing that is at our socket index. So we'll get the target sockets. Then we'll get a copy. Then we want to copy our socket index and connect it here. If it is the case that we are cycling to a socket that we already have targeting, we want to increment the socket index. So we can just type in ++, which will just add 1 to it. And then exactly as we did here, we want to check to see if we are out of bounds for the array. And if we are, . we're going to end our cycle again. And if we aren't, we can copy our get array. And then we will set our target socket to be whatever is in this current position. And then because we changed the target socket, we also want to update the target location. So we want to drag in our selected target. And we want to set the target location from our blueprint interface. Now we go back to our second branch. Off of false, we are going to set the target socket to be what is currently in this get, as this is going to be the next point in the array. Then, just as we did, we're going to copy the set target location and set that to be what our current socket is. Then, just as we did here, we want to increment the array. And if we increment the array and it is past the point of the length of our sockets, we just want to call end cycle again. So now we have an event that will handle through cycling through our array of every possible targetable socket that we input on our boss character. Now when we get to end cycle, we want to handle this so then if we are cycling and we only have one boss enemy to cycle, we don't increment the index of our targetable actors, and instead we're going to repeat the process of the cycle. So we're going to go back to bone of 0 and restart the entire cycle process. Otherwise, if we have another targetable actor, we're going to get rid of all the target sockets that we have here, and then we're going to worry about just a single target actor. So in our end cycle, we're first going to get our socket index and set it to be 0. And just for good measure, we're going to clear the target sockets because every time we call this, we're going to be setting a new host of sockets anyway. Then we get a branch, and we're going to check to see if the length of our targeted actors array is less than 2, meaning we only have one thing to target. Of course, you can change this depending on what you want to do for your own project, which is why I'm doing this way. So if we do have either nothing in this array or we only have one thing in this array, we're going to stop here. We don't have to worry about anything being off the true branch. Otherwise, we're going to take our index and we are going to increment it. Then we want to take our selected actor and we are going to turn off our hard lock. Well, set it to hidden at least. And then we need to check again for the length of our array since we incremented this. If we are over the index, we want to set this index back to be 0. And then we want to have our selected target be our targeted actors at this index. So we'll get our targeted actors, get a copy. And we could just drag in the index reference here and set our selected target. Otherwise, we can copy this and set this up as true. And we're just going to get a reference to whatever index we're currently at as our get. And then we can copy our hard lock widget. And either way, we're going to set this back to be visible. So now we either go into the next actor in our actors array or we go back to the start. Either way, we're going to be changing it. Since we turned the hard lock widget off of that actor, we're going to turn it on for the next actor. So let's test this out. We have our soft lock engaged. I'm going to lock on to our boss actor. And now we cycle through our sockets that are currently on the actor, and we have another actor here. So as soon as we're done cycling, we go into the next index of our targeted actors array, so we can go back to our normal cycling. And if the boss actor is still out of view, it's not going to be covered. Now, depending on how you want to implement this into your game, this is meant for big bosses. So we could go through and make a line of sight check for each socket. And then that way, if we're out of line of sight, then it breaks the target lock. I'm not going to go do that. Otherwise, if you have a big enemy, the get distance to is going to be at the center of the actor, pretty much exactly as the pelvis is. So even if this is just out of sight, because we have line of sight with the pelvis, it's still going to hold. Entirely up to you as to what you want to do, but I figured I would just mention that. So now we're going to be moving on to our focus target. So with our find look at rotation, we just have this going to our get actor location for our selected target. But if we want to have our focus target be on the socket location, we would need to get the socket's location, input the target socket, and also get a reference to our actor's mesh. So I'm going to drag this out further and clip the pin. And we're going to say create event and call focus target, just to give us a little bit more room to work with without having a giant red wire going through everything. And we're going to want to get our BPI multi-target points, as we have a reference to our actor here. And we can just take the selected actor. And then we're going to connect that right to the branch. So off of our actor's mesh, we can get socket location. And our socket location is, of course, going to be our target socket. And off of our vector, we can select a vector. And we're going to connect this into the target of our look at rotation. And our get actor location is going to be B, while our socket location is going to be A. Now, I set cycling as an explicit variable, so then we know if we are cycling. If we have an actor that we switch off this multi-target actor boolean in their sheet, or they get destroyed, so then we can't reference that, we may run into a few issues. So that's why I'm not connecting this pin to our A value here. Now if we test this out, we switch to our multi-target actor that went to a weird place and it's not switching back based on cycling. Off of our false, where we put cycling to be false, let's just remove that. And at the end of our cycle, We'll set the variable to be false there instead. Now our control shifts back. And while this may work for our soft lock, it looks like it's having an issue doing so with our hard lock. So if we go back to our multi-target points and we get a reference to actor, another way to go about doing this, if we don't want to just get a reference to this actor mesh, we're going to remove this. And just like how I said at the intro of this series, whenever you get into combat, you don't want the player to be pressing E to start area scan. There has to be some event or event dispatch. So then when your character, or well, when your player gets into an area that has enemies in it, or they load into a level, you want to start area scan. Much in the same way that if you get into a boss arena that has a multi-target actor, you want to send that information to your player character. Now we don't have that set up, but to simulate that, on event begin play, we're going to get actor of class, and the actor is going to be BP boss, and then we promote this to a variable. And we'll just call this boss reference. Or you can call it multi-target actor. If you're making child classes, then you can get all actors of class, so then you get BP boss, BP mini boss, whatever else you want to make. But off in our socket location, we'll get the boss reference, and then we'll get the mesh. So now when we tab over, we lock on to these points individually. And if we cycle through everything, and we cycle out to our enemy, we have no more errors coming up. One more thing we're going to change is off of our tab cycling. If we try to target cycle while we have just our actor here, we're not able to cycle away from our actor. Because we no longer have any targeted actors on the screen. So off of our condition, we're going to get an OR boolean. And we're going to check to see if our selected target actually, we're going to copy this exactly from right here. Get class and get class child of. So now if we're only targeting this actor and we target away, now we're able to move to another actor. So that's all for this series. If you have any questions about the project, feel free to ask on the Discord. If you like this project and many others I've done previously, check out my Patreon, where I turn these projects into organized, annotated blueprint components to add to your own project. And there's a few freebies in there as well if you want to join as a free member. Thank you to the Pillars for your amazing support, Winterberry Shark, Thatcher Moss, Francesco Pota, and K Panic. And of course, let me know if you like this video by liking the video. With all that being said, thank you all for watching, and I hope you've been inspired.